I'm back.
Yes, please.
Sorry.
Yes.
Everything that could possibly go wrong with these virtual meetings could, right?
That's okay.
When
No
you go
problem.
into,
No
yeah.
problem.
Yeah, so just the basics of having an understanding in the field. And of course, there are foundational courses like you can take, like this one, or more tech-driven ones like the ones on Coursera and other online platforms. So just familiarizing yourself with it, if you have some experience in programming, learning Python and TensorFlow, because when you actually do something hands-on, then you understand the details of it, of what the limitations are. And so not only is it important for your own learning, like if you want to actually learn it, but also it helps you understand what's going on in the field. So then when you read the articles, when you see the new technology, then you can separate what's the great stuff and what the not so great ones are, right? And Tashmeen also kind of mentioned this, but I would recommend starting small. So choose an industry that you're particularly interested in, and then start researching that industry and think of all the different ways that AI is currently being used in the industry now and what the potentials of it could be. So what are some potential areas that we haven't tapped into? And I think we can mostly do this in fields where we find interest in and we're passionate about. Because it makes it just more of an enjoyable process for us. And of course, because my background is in psychology and I'm researching more of the behavioral side of AI, my one thing is to really focus on the human side of AI. And I think this is an area that is often overlooked, but it's going to become increasingly more important and needed in all industries. So whether you're coming from an engineering background or you're coming from a business background, just having this understanding of what the consequences will be for humans will really set you apart as both an engineer and as a manager, because it's not something that most people are thinking about. And so if you come in with that lens, then you bring in new understandings of it and a new approach to it. And so it's also useful in seeing, what the long-term potential of that technology will be. So the last thing we want to do is create AI systems that are just cool and shiny and new, but that they have a short lifespan. Yeah, so another thing is, I'm looking at my notes here. I would urge you to think deeply about what the unintended consequences are, right? So anytime we create a new technology, we think of what we want it to do, right? So when we think about the internet or when we think about social media, it was created to connect us. But some of the unintended consequences were actually that it created a lot of anxiety in teenagers and a lot of health problems. And so looking at these long-term or these unintended consequences can make us create products that are actually better from the get-go. And anytime you have this lens on technology where you're creating it for the better good of society, you're also likely to experience this psychological state of meaningfulness. So I'm drawing this from research. There's this whole literature called job design and work design. And so there are core dimensions of a job. And one of the core dimensions is this thing called task significance. So anytime that task significance is basically saying that what you're doing, all the tasks that you're doing have an effect on the lives and work of other people. And so if you go into it with that mindset, not only are you doing it something good for other people, but you're actually experiencing higher levels of meaningfulness in your work, which means you're actually producing better things and you're, you have a higher job satisfaction and you have better performance at work. So then it's this cycle where, you create something good, it helps others, but that in turn also makes your job a lot better. And another thing to kind of end this on is this need for a shift from AI taking over our jobs to a shift of looking at how AI can actually help augment the things that we're doing. And the reason I say this is that in the beginning, especially with automation, a lot of times why we create these technologies is to, for the machine, for the robot to do the heavy lifting for us. So whether that's physically heavy lifting or that's to take away the mundane things away from us. And so, but now because of deep learning and all of these new these new techniques that we're seeing, it's not just about mundane tasks, it's about knowledge work. So we're seeing it in the work of doctors, we're seeing it in the work of lawyers and accountants in financial predictions, as Tasveen had just recently mentioned. And so when we think about knowledge work and tasks that require like cognitive skills, then it won't be about the AI taking over our jobs. It's more about augmenting. So how do we create systems that actually help us become better in our jobs? And so this is good for the individual level and the organizational level, because if you can create systems that actually augment people's work, then people are more likely to accept it into the workplace. So sometimes, especially because the conversation is so much about AI taking over our jobs, people are very hesitant, and there's a lot of fear associated with that. So if you work with the employees and you say, okay, tell us what parts of your job you like and you don't like, which areas would you want to grow in, and then you can kind of build that together. Of course, I'm saying a very ideal version, but to go in with this mindset helps, because then your employees actually want to use the AI system, and so it helps at the organizational level too, because you're implementing it and it's helping everyone. Yeah, and then I think having this shift will also attract the kind of people that we want to create and work with AI, right? So whether that's engineers or the business side, because even though a lot of times we'll hear that AI is dangerous, I don't think it's AI that's dangerous, it's the people behind AI that are dangerous. And so if we have this this shift in our thinking in how it can augment and make us better instead of just replacing us, then we'll attract people who are more responsible and more have stronger moral code, and so that creates AI that's good for all of us. So yeah, these are just some things, but I think my main focus is very much to focus on the human side of it and to make sure that we have more responsible and moral people in AI on either side, engineers or managers. And yeah, so that's just my few points to think about how to prepare for a tech-driven future. And if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to, ask. We have a raised hand.
Yes, please guys, make most of this opportunity. It is not every day you will find such a talented person in the room. So please ask any short question or something like that. If there is something you would want to really ask, please raise hands and participate. Thank you.
Yeah, what do I think about the gender gap in the AI field? Well, I think because AI roots from engineering and it roots from computer science, it's not just an AI problem. It's something that's like been, it's kind of ingrained in how it's been done. But I think in many ways we are seeing so many more women entering not just STEM, but also AI. And we see the CEOs at some of these main companies also being women. So I do have a lot of hope. I think there are women doing great jobs. And let's not forget that Ada Lovelace, the first programmer, was also a woman. So yeah, I think there's potential for it. And